Just a couple of questions there for the two organisations. You've been in at the task force, both groups. When you were in the task force, was it discussed about Northern Ireland being brought into the PGI status? And what's in return for that? Have you got any agreement, or did you look for this nomad cattle rule to be gone? Because if Northern Ireland wants to come in with us in PGI status, have you secured that as the farmer organisations when you agreed to the PGI status? And the logo on the PGI, was that discussed, that Board B is using, was that discussed and was it agreed by you, the farmer organisations? Thank you. And the last question in relation to the calves, it is my understanding that a large buyer in Holland is maybe no longer functioning, that was buying maybe probably up to 4,000 calves a week. What do ye see as solving that issue? I talked to some people that export calves, and there was talk here last week about Spain. There appears to be problems enough getting calves to Spain. Where do you see the outlets? And if there isn't the outlets, what are we going to do? Are we going to flood the market here, or what's your solutions to that? Thank you.
Okay, thanks, David Fitzmaurice. I'll let the ICMSA go first this time.
Thank you, Mr. Chairperson. I suppose on Deputy Collins' question is how will the fund be distributed? I suppose from our perspective on that, Deputy Collins, it really depends on where the losses are suffered. And at this stage, we don't know where that is. But you know, certainly from our perspective, we would believe if there is losses at farm level, they're going to have to be directed at the farmers who suffer the losses. In terms of flying calves out of Ireland, I think our Deputy President has covered that point. You know, certainly there's work ongoing in relation to that, but you know, it's the economics of that option is the big concern. And I think, you know, the economics of that, you know, are questionable at the present time. In terms of the Deputy Collins and the banks, certainly we have met the banks on a number of occasions recently, and you know, we would have members who would be in financial difficulty. There would be practices out there that we wouldn't be happy with, to be quite honest with you. Certainly on behalf of ultra funds, etc. At the bank level, you know, they would say to us at the moment that they haven't seen too much stress as a result of Brexit or COVID, but you know, if we have a no-deal Brexit, that could become a bigger issue very, very quickly. On Deputy Fitzmaurice's questions, I suppose on the calves, I suppose, you know, the reality, the buyers of Irish calves are the Netherlands and the Spain, and you know, I suppose over the years the figures have gone up and gone down, but there's always been a market there. Obviously, COVID is an issue. Like everybody else, we hope that the vaccine will work and the food service will get back in action as soon as possible. But you know, the reality is the buyers of Irish calves this year will be the Netherlands and Spain. In relation to the PGI, unfortunately, our President and Chairperson of the Livestock Committee representatives on that, and I don't have the details on that, but certainly I can revert to you on those issues after if needs be.
Okay, thanks, Sean. Edmund or Eddie?
Yeah, just I suppose on the issue of the nomad cattle is a supermarket problem, which I think is an anti-competitive practice, but it's not a regulatory problem other than the EU regulations on labelling require that the country of origin is on every specific piece of beef. And traditionally what has happened is that because the UK supermarkets have said to put the label born in Ireland, finished in UK would be too complex for supermarket consumers to understand, they've simply said we won't do it. Now the interesting thing is that the Italian consumer apparently is more intelligent than the British consumer because they're able to understand that, right? So that's, in our view, an anti-competitive practice that's going on in the UK, imposed by supermarkets, and there's a question mark in our view about whether processors have been too willing to accept that particular answer at UK level. Now, in terms then of, so to go back then to the question of the PGI and what was discussed at the Beef Task Force, there was a lot of time fighting basically to ensure that, and there's two things here, there's the PGI application and there's the Suckler brand application, to ensure that both of those were controlled by a monitoring committee which had a majority farmer representation. And it was agreed in the course of those discussions that the monitoring committee would have the final say on how the Suckler brand and how the PGI would be organised for, I suppose, obviously at the moment there is no PGI status, but as soon as it was agreed that those monitoring committees would have the final say in the use of those. Now there is an element of grey area around this, because traditionally PGI status has been sought by I suppose co-ops or groups of farmers or primary producers. So for example, the Connemara Hill lamb was got by a co-op, if you like, of primary producers in Connemara. This is, in our view, tricky because Bord Bia is the applicant for this. So we want to see that monitoring group having complete say over it. But I mean, in terms of what's written in stone, there's nothing written in stone. There is an agreement that the monitoring committee for the PGI will be majority farmer representative. But until such time as the application is passed at EU level, that PGI monitoring committee is not up and running yet. So that's what we have to say about that. That's all we can say about that. But I know that we spent a lot of time insisting in private discussions with the department and Bord Bia that the use of that PGI status had to be within the control of the monitoring group, and that means the use of the logo certainly. Now there are difficulties with PGI, by the way, which is that the EU regulations state that a PGI status is available to any primary producer who meets the standards set out in the PGI. And this is difficult because even, for example, if farmers set up their own PGI status, and if, for example, we in ICSA set up a PGI status, if another bunch of farmers met the standards set out in that PGI status, we would have difficulty in saying, ye can't use it. That's the EU regulation side of it. If you meet all of the standards set out under the PGI, it's not permitted, as we understand it, for if you like, a group or a co-op of farmers to say it's only ours. And that's why there are, I suppose, challenges in relation to a national PGI that you mightn't have if you had a localised PGI status. So if, for example, you have Connemara Hill lamb, it's obvious that a farmer below in Waterford can't benefit from a PGI called Connemara Hill lamb. But when you have a national PGI, there are a lot of question marks about restricting the use of that, which I think are still not going to be solved even after the PGI is granted. And I think we'll have to see what the EU says about it first.
Okay, Edmund.
If we just come in on...
Chairperson.
Sorry.
Sorry, I'll let you in a second, Larkin, okay? Edmund, yeah.
Yeah, just come in on the nomad issue. I've always been of the opinion that it is the processor, or it suits the processor very much. It's the same processors, Irish processor, that seem to be processed the majority of stock in the UK as well as here. And it suits them very well to keep Irish cattle prisoners in Ireland, that they can keep the price down. They have many ways of doing that with their own feedlots and everything. They control the market completely. And we see even recently factory fit cattle being sold in the marts. They've no bother paying the equivalent of maybe 4.20, 4.30 a kilo there, where they're only prepared to give 3.70 direct to the farmer. So I think it is, as Eddie said, it is anti-competitive. But what can be done about it, I don't know. But funny enough, we say there's no such thing as nomad sheep, and all the sheep that come the other way. So it's, you know what I'm getting at. Okay, thank you.
Larkin.
Thank you, Chairman. No, look, I just add a little bit on the PGI. The PGI is obviously we have our traits, and it shows up very well in our grass-fed, our Board B exports, our Kerrygold, etc., all over the world. So, you know, it has worked extremely well for that product, that our Kerrygold brand is worth double the equivalent on a UK or a USA in New York, whatever. It's worth double that. Now, look, it'll not be as good, hopefully it will, but probably not as good for the beef. But it will get 70% of all livestock across that. The PGI will get 70% all into that. So, look, we're all in this together. That's the way I would look at it. Just in case questions don't come up about the milk and meat process and business, Chairman, I would like to address that maybe later on if it comes up, but I would like the opportunity to address the process and the logistics of cross-border milk, etc. So